Welcome into another episode, Bassmaster fans, to the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, and my co-host, Kyle Jessie, hanging out with us today. And we are previewing. We've got through 2 Elite Series events. We made it through the Classic. All right. If you didn't listen to any of those podcasts, you can go back and watch the latest archives, either on the playlist here on YouTube or in the iTunes store or the podcast where you listen to your podcast. Just go back to the last episodes if you want to catch up, if you're driving somewhere or something like that. But this week, this episode, we are previewing the third stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series for the 2022 season, and that is, drum roll please, Santee Cooper Lakes, Lake Marion, Lake Moultrie over in the low country of South Carolina, which should be a big-time event, Kyle.
Absolutely. You know, you look back to 2020, the last time the Elite Series was there, obviously it was scheduled in the spring before COVID hit. And then you saw a much tougher, just like you saw a lot of those fall time tournaments were tough. And, you know, I think we were all sitting there thinking, wow, I wish this was in the springtime, because we all really wanted to see that. We all had high expectations, but here we are, 2022, and we're going to get to do it in the spring. And I know we're super, super excited about it.
Yeah. When we made the schedule, when others made the schedule, not we like me and you, but when others made the schedule, and we were informed about it, you kind of circle a couple places, and the Harris Chain was one for me, kind of underperformed, even though it was a very compelling event and very interesting, which all of our events will be, because the storylines that come up and the characters involved. But when you look at the lakes and you're like, what lake or which venues can you maybe break 100 pounds for 4 days? Which, man, there are some fantastic bodies of water that pump out big weights that will never have a shot to do a 4-day 100-pound total. But one of those lakes that's actually on the Century Club list, but from way back in 2006. I mean, this is only the third time we've ever been there for the Elite Series, 2006. And then we have, which was the inaugural Elite season, 2020 in the fall. And then this year, Santee Cooper Lakes, that body of water was literally circled by so many people as possible 100 pounds, but there will be some obstacles and they will have to hit it correctly, which is what we'll get into in just a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Classic being last week, of course, you saw some of the early signs of the spawn. You know, even some fish being seen on beds, caught probably off of beds, some of them hard to say, obviously, but you know, when you look at Santee Cooper, obviously a little southeast, I guess, of Hartwell, you know, the water's going to be warmer. It's been warm up until now when we're shooting this at, you know, in South Carolina. And then, you know, the weekend of the tournament is supposed to have, like we were just talking about, lows in the 50s at night and then highs in the upper mid 70s. So, I mean, it should be a slugfest. But then again, we did talk about this as well. We hyped up the Harris Chain a lot, and like you just mentioned, it was
more so.
Well, we both agreed, because we both really had that one circled to maybe be the highest weight tournament of the year. But something, you know, that could be said about this year's schedule is the fact that there's so many heavyweight tournaments. I mean, if you just look at it, obviously the St. Johns River, Harris Chain, Lake Chickamauga, Lake Fork, Santee Cooper, and the St. Lawrence River, I mean, those are all in contention potentially to be the heaviest weight tournaments of the year. Obviously, the first 2 events in Florida, I think the weights were, you know, obviously a little bit lower than we might have expected. But, I mean, really, really heavyweight tournaments on the schedule this year, and this might be the heaviest of them all.
Yeah, and I'll even throw in Lake Oahe up in South Dakota, next to last stop of the season. With smallmouth, we could see weights that rival the St. Lawrence River, depending if weather is nice to us. It's much wider in places than St. Lawrence, so we'll get into that, you know, later in the season. But yeah, this season, I mean, it kind of feels like last year, excluding the Sabine and Neely Henry, every place on here should be 75 plus pounds at least. A couple should be close in the 90 to 100 range, maybe 1 or 2 lakes that hit 100 pounds. And then we've got that, you know, the Mississippi River to end the season is kind of like the Neely Henry. There's going to be a lot of guys with a lot of solid weights, but nothing really big. And to break 100 pounds on largemouth, so it's easier to do 25 pounds a day for 4 straight days with smallmouth compared to 25 pounds a day with largemouth. If you're going to do that, I was talking to Patrick Walters on the phone a little earlier. If you're going to hit 100 pounds on largemouth, it's most likely going to be in the form of you catch 30 pounds, then you catch 21, then you catch 18 to 20, and then you catch 30 again, and it gets you to right around 100 pounds. Now, if you don't have such a low day in those middle 2 days and you maybe have 22 to 23 pounds, then that's where you get to 112 pounds, 107 pounds, something like that. But to look at the weights back in 2006 when they hit it perfectly at Santee Cooper, honestly, dude, I mean, it was like 92 pounds was leading after 3 days, like 2 bass, maybe 1.5 bass on the final day, and they broke 100 pounds. It was absolutely incredible.
No, definitely. And that, if you ever watch that tournament, that's why we're saying what we're saying, is because the Santee Cooper Lakes are so special, and the big fish live there. And like you said, when they hit it just right, I mean, it showed out in a big, big way. So, I mean, the conditions we have, the time we're going to, the chain of lakes there, it could definitely be really special. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into that with you, and I'm going to look it up real quick to see if I can get a good weather outlook for Santee Cooper, because okay, so I've got it pulled up right now. They're actually sandwiched when we're recording this a few days before the tournament starts, right around when practice is going to be starting for these guys. When you're looking at it, there's going to be rain in the forecast over the weekend, and it's going to be cold. The rain, it's during around a 60-degree time frame, but after that rain passes, that front that goes through over the weekend, it will drop down and the lows will be in the mid to low 20s, which is not what you ever want to see. But the highs, it jumps up on Sunday, 23 to 52, goes back down to 33 on Monday, 63 for the high, 46 for the low on Tuesday, 69 for the high on Tuesday. And Wednesday will actually be an off day, and that is a pouring down rain day, according to the weather forecast right now. A lot of the winds during practice are going to be very light, 5 miles an hour or so. But on that day, Wednesday's off day, that might be the best time to off day ever, because it looks like it's supposed to blow a lot of wind and rain all day long. And like you said, that the lows, they go from the 30s right when that front passes through, in the low 20s. It gets up and it stabilizes around mid to low 50s all through the tournament, highs in the 70s. And one thing that's very important is I believe that we will be seeing a full moon either the final day before the event or day one of the event. So it's kind of timed up a couple weeks after Harris Chain. We could be going into a warming trend, more stable weather and water temperatures, most likely after all that cold front and rain. And we'll pair that with a full moon. So Kyle, there will be 0 bass on beds, according to our hype and expectation. But honestly, there should be some side fishing that goes on for sure. And at Santee Cooper, there's going to be giants that are up there.
Yeah, no doubt. And, you're getting to the time of the year right now where the fish are wanting to do that anyways. The days are getting longer, temperatures warming up. Obviously, if you're a fisherman, whenever the time gets right, it never fails. There's going to be some bad weather. There's going to be some cold weather, something from keeping those fish from getting up there and spawning. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good thing that it's happening prior to the tournament starting. Guys will be able to get a little bit of a feel during practice with the bad weather, and probably make their adjustments and kind of assume what's going to happen if the weather does what it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think that they'll develop some patterns on that. Practice this week is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. They gave them an off day on Wednesday, so it's a little bit different. If you're not seeing updates from your favorite pros, just know the tournament's still on, and it's for Thursday through Sunday like normal, but we gave them an off day. Not quite sure why, other than the anglers, like a 63 to 37 vote, last year, would like an off day occasionally. And so this is one of the events that has that. So from that Sunday and Monday practice period, when it does get miserable, if someone can develop a pattern outside of sight fishing, which it's not going to be conducive to look at them, if you can develop a pattern there, that could be deadly, paired with ever-changing weather and fish progressively getting on bed. You can always find a fish on bed and catch a big fish on bed, but it not be your primary pattern. So we will see that play out, and it's going to be a good one. Maybe 100 pounds, maybe not. At least something in the 90s we should see. It should definitely show up. But one other key that we'll mention before we get into our fantasy fishing picks is that for Santee Cooper Lakes, it is about 2 feet low. And it's been about 2 feet low for a little while now, 1.5 to 2 feet low, which will make navigation a little bit tougher. Obviously, boat lanes are very important there. There's other shortcuts that you can get around outside the boat lanes. Be advised, ask Patrick Walters, all of those, because you do not want to have your lower unit get taken off. There was a local tournament there just, I think, during the Classic where an angler broke his motor off and it went up in the boat with them, and they've been in the hospital. Our thoughts and prayers with them as they recover from that accident. But Santee Cooper, the reason why fish grow big there is because it is a jungle and plenty of structure and cover and conducive for those fish, but not great for 21.5 foot fiberglass boats with motors that stick down below the boat. Right, right, Kyle?
Yeah, definitely not. And if you look back at the 2020 tournament, if you go back on YouTube and watch some of the shows and some of the videos, you'll understand exactly what Ronnie's talking about. It's definitely a jungle.
Yeah, it's like a Toledo Bend, except a little bit more under the water at times. There's still plenty above the water that you need to look at, but definitely some hidden gems underneath there that will get you big time. Old cypress trees and whatnot. When we're looking at the lakes, Lake Marion, which is our takeoff lake, the one that basically I-95 crosses off the far west section of that, Lake Marion is, I think, the biggest lake in South Carolina, and that's not even including Lake Moultrie. So it goes from Lake Marion, and then you can run out of there and go to Lake Moultrie through the diversion canal. And even then, I don't think you can lock through, but it will funnel from Lake Moultrie into the Cooper River, which is Winyah Bay. So a couple connected bodies of water there that now you know where you're at in this region, not far from the beach for Santee Cooper Lakes. And we should see some interesting things there. And that's what I'm kind of, if you're listening and you're like, why are they saying it plural? Santee Cooper Lakes, because it is 2 different lakes. And this year we should see Lake Moultrie come into play a little bit more than it did in 2020, where we only really saw one guy in the top 15 or 20 advance via that lake itself. A little bit of a haul to get there, but I think that there will be anglers that give it a look-see, especially those who have a good game plan. There will be some guys who write it off because it did not factor in 2020 really, but I think in the spring, much more susceptible, according to Davey Height as well, for it to possibly play.
Yeah, and if there's a long run to be made, somebody is going to choose to make that run. It doesn't matter where we're at. That almost always be the case.
If gas gets a little higher, we're going to have the most people fishing closer to the ramp than we've ever seen in the Elite Series.
It might end up being a troll motor only tournament.
Yeah, they're going to vote on that on Wednesday for sure, depending on what the levels get to gas price wise. Obviously, all joking, no trolling motor tournaments. Hey, if they all knock their lower units off in practice, it might be a trolling motor only tournament, but we pray for safety for all those anglers as well as good fishing. And Kyle, why don't we go ahead and jump into it? Fantasy fishing wise, but I'm going to spring this on you. I want to know our percentages and where we rank right now. 3 events in the books. We've had 2 elites and the Classic. And honestly, kind of expected. I did not expect my percentage to be so low for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, but I definitely expected my Drain the Lake to be higher. That is one that I feel like I could excel at much more. But I started, honestly, I've had 3 very blah events for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing to kick it off, which is your 5-man team. I've got 3,119 points and I'm at 68%, 68th percentile, and I'm ranked 10,635. It is honestly incredible that basically I am in the top third of fantasy fishing, and that's 10,000 plus people. That means there's over 30,000 people playing fantasy fishing, and I'm just beating all the people who didn't set their rosters for the first event.
Yeah, exactly. You and I have talked about this already on the previous podcast, but we both basically took a flip. So mine is almost exactly opposite of that now. So in Rapala fantasy fishing, I also did not have a great start, but the Classic I did pretty well at 91%. 3,347 points. So I'm doing all right there. But
wait, what was that say again? 3,400?
3,347. Hold on one second. I just 3,347.
So you're literally 228 points ahead of me, and you're 24% higher. That is incredible. It's only 200. I can jump in one event. I can make that up, and I'm about to this week.
It can happen quick, but you and I basically took the exact opposite turn in Drain the Lake. So I was before the Classic, I was at, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say like 93%, 90, just sub mid 90s. And I took a turn for the worse in the Classic and dropped down to 85.8% in Drain the Lake. So I got to step it up this week in Drain the Lake.
Well, I went from 86% after 2 events to 94%. And I'm not lying for anyone who wants to check me on that. 94%, 1,030th in the world, 5,765 points. And just for transparency purposes, I'm not only going to show off my bad stats or my good stats, I will share my bad stats with you too. If you can see that 68%, that's the bad one. But 94%, very good. And the key is that I had, come on, camera. I had Jason Christie, which got me triple points for, there it is, triple points for the Classic, over 900 points for picking the winner. Very, very thankful for that one. Came so close at the Harris chain. I had 8 anglers for Drain the Lake make the cut. 4 made the final day, and I got 2nd and 3rd and 7th and 8th. If one of those guys wins the event, no offense, Buddy Gross, I get double points there, and I am just zooming to the top. But we wanted to set the tone with our percentages so that we can be transparent and give you our picks going forward. I will say, when we did the podcast for the Classic, I had Gerald Swindle on my team, subbed him out the night before the tournament, and I put Brandon Lester in. I will never make a sub for Drain the Lake unless a guy is not fishing, okay? Drain the Lake, me and Tommy and Such have a 3-man competition going. We set our teams before the season started, and we're seeing how it played out. I'll never make a sub there unless something dramatic happens. But for Rapala, I made a switch. Bucket B, I put Brandon Lester instead of Gerald Swindle. Lester finished in the mid to low 30s, low meaning like 38th, and Swindle made the cut, but he ended up finishing closer to that cut line than the top 10. So I didn't feel as bad about my mistake there. So had Jason Christie in both teams, which was very key. Let's get into our not Harris chain, Santee Cooper Lakes picks, and I'm going to have you go first. Go.
So bucket A, I'm going with one of the hot hands here. I'm going with Stetson Blaylock in bucket A. So for a variety of reasons. One, he's obviously got all the momentum in the world, sitting in the top 10 in AOY points right now, coming off a 3rd place finish there at the Classic, of course. Just a really good springtime angler. I mean, if you look back to the Winyah Bay tournament, I'm not suggesting that the 2 fisheries are identical, but I think some of the 2, will factor as far as like the different techniques that he was fishing at Santee Cooper, or at the at Winyah Bay will compare to the Santee Cooper Lakes. Obviously, we can fish a wacky rig with the best of them. That's surprisingly a big deal there at Santee Cooper. If you pay any attention to springtime events there, I mean, it seems like you just muscle up and power fish them to death, and you can. But at the same point, that wacky rig has really proved to be a huge player. So you'll see in some of my picks that's some of the logic, but also a really good sight fisherman. I just think with all the momentum in the world right now, I mean, I think Stetson Blaylock's solid in bucket A at, I want to say it was around 18%, if I can find it real fast, 18% on the dot right now. So not the highest, but not the lowest. I like that mid-range in bucket A.
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of those guys, and you'll look at the rank. If you look at the rank, Stetson Blaylock is number 1 in fantasy fishing right now, but you got to think it's because the Classic counts as well. He's not number 1 in Angler of the Year. Most, right, if not all, the guys in that bucket A are in the top 15 or so in Angler of the Year, but we do add the Classic in. So when Clifford Perch, Jay Shakirat, Bernie Schultz, Jake Whitaker are listed as 40s to 50s rank overall, it's because they did not participate in the Classic, so their fantasy points were null and void. I'm going to go from one wacky rigger to another, and like you mentioned, the wacky rig works so well. And to get a little technique specific, Santee Cooper is full of cypress trees and other types of vegetation, trees, wood, vegetation, things like that. But cypress trees are cavernous on the inside of them. If you've ever seen a tree, there's normally like a hole at the bottom of them. And it'll be that way. Those cypress knees will, grow up on the from out beneath those. And they kind of are bigger than what they show. If the tree is here, it's going to be hollow at the bottom, but the rest of the tree is going to go out. And that's why if you flip, if you wind anything around there, that's why you always get hung up, is because there's so much more stuff around there. And so you want something that you can fish successfully around it, but not get stuck and hung up in it. And that would be a wacky rig, perfect slow fall right around the base of that where those holes are, fish will get, and also right above those cypress knees. I think they're knees or needs. Like, I don't know if there's a D on the end of it. Cypress needs. I just say it real quick in the South and nobody bothers, but around those cypress trees, wacky rig is huge. That's why you also see a square bill, though. If you can successfully fish it slowly, you can get a flat side or a balsa bait around those, pause it, it'll float up, it won't get hung up, and you can catch them like Kevin Short did at Pickwick years and years ago. But now to my pick, now that I've given you a fishing lesson, John Cox. I got to go with John Cox, mostly because there's a possibility for sight fishing, but also because his ability to catch them on whatever he wants. And the only drawback to this is if he makes the final day for the other trails that he fishes, he will have very limited, if any, practice for Santee Cooper. So I will say, be on the lookout. I may switch him out depending on how he does and if he gets any practice, because he did not fare well in fantasy fishing or in the regular standings last year when he went from one event to another with no practice. I remember Neely Henry, he was bottom 5 in that event, no practice, did not work well for him, even though the changing conditions threw everyone for a loop. He had nothing to go off of. So I'd be much more confident in him here than Neely Henry with no practice. But I mean, you just got to be sure, you just got to keep an eye on that situation, because I think it does end on the 16th, which is an off day for us, but the tournament starts on the 17th. So I'll pick John Cox, but be weary of that. And I kind of said I'm not going to pick him. And then I could not figure out anyone else in bucket A to pick because it's such a difficult bucket right now. Like I literally, it's the hardest bucket I had out of all the buckets. So out of those 5 groupings, bucket A was the most difficult. I said I wasn't going to pick John Cox because of his schedule. Then I kept looking around. I was like, I don't feel convinced of anybody else, honestly, as strongly as I did John Cox. So I had to.
And to your credit, too, with sight fishing, I mean, how many times do you hear about, obviously, you can find sight fish in practice, and they'll either last year, they won't. It's usually one of the two things. Can you find enough? Can you find enough spawners that, other people aren't catching? That kind of thing. But John Cox has proved over the course of his career, he finds sight fish during the tournament, too. Like, if there's somebody that's going to find them while the tournament's going on, it's John Cox. So even with less practice, I definitely see where that pick could definitely play well for you.
I can't wait to have some Elite Series pros being like, yo, I didn't see you here in practice, bro. And he'll be like, dude, I didn't even get to practice. So they'll have to argue that one out on the water. But I'm going to go from John Cox in bucket A, what was his percentage? His percentage was 21%. 21. So yeah, that's a big percentage for a guy without practice, to just be on the lookout for that. Bucket B, I'm going to go David Williams. A little bit of a shocker, probably percentage-wise, notoriety-wise, 0.2% for him. Having a great start to his season in Florida. He may be a North Carolina boy, but it seems like a lot of those Lake Norman boys that fish team tournaments growing up throughout their time of fishing, they've had to go to a championship event somewhere, sometime on Santee Cooper, and they know how to fish that place. And so I'm expecting David Williams, and not for sight fishing purposes, but just for fishing purposes. I think that he'll catch them just fine fishing, may end up stumbling upon a big one or two, on bed. But I honestly think that he could be one that maybe tries out Lake Moultrie.
I dig that pick for sure. That definitely lower percentage. I didn't see the percent, but it has to be
0.2.
Yeah. No, I think that could definitely pay off. And that's what we've talked about so many times, is making those gambles with some lower percentage guys is how you separate yourself. This last,
you did it at the Classic. Yeah.
At the Classic. Yeah. So I had Luke Palmer in bucket D, who was the lowest angler in the bucket, and he was the best finish in the bucket. So although, I had 2 guys that didn't make the third day cut, that propelled you a lot. So it's really not a bad thing to take some risk every once in a while, especially if you're behind. If you're not in 98, 99% right now, take some risk. It makes it worth it. With that said, I'm not going to take as big a risk in bucket B, and I'm going to take Greg Hackney. So it's funny that neither of us took Patrick Walters, and I think I can speak for both of us in saying it's not a matter of not thinking Patrick's going to catch him. Obviously, he's got the most, hometown history, maybe not tournament history, just because of how long some of these guys have been fishing, tournaments compared to Patrick. But Greg Hackney is one of those guys that did really well in 2006. This style fits up perfectly. Like I said, definitely not going out on a limb by any means. 14.6%. I want to say he's the second highest picked angler in the bucket. But I mean, this just sets up so well for his strengths. Can sight fish, can just power fish. I mean, this kind of tournament, being versatile on top of having some fish located and catching some on beds could be a big thing. And I definitely think Greg Hackney in bucket B, as long as he's not in bucket A, I'm going to probably take him more often than not.
Yeah, and I'll also say that because we have two game modes, we cannot pick a local favorite in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, because we have another place that we can pick them and rely on them. Like Brandon Cobb, I did not pick him in bucket A at Hartwell for the Classic. I ended up picking the winner. He ended up struggling, not making the cut. Caught 10 pounds on day one at Hartwell. Not what you'd expect at all. And so when the playing field is much more even, which I always like to say it's an even playing field during sight fishing events or during events where some form of the spawn is happening, it kind of takes your local advantage maybe out of it. Unless there are still a good number of fish offshore. We saw Patrick Walters mess around with some offshore stuff. Last time we were here in the fall, some brush piles, some other overlooked places. He could do well with those as well. We saw Brandon Polinick even catch a 7-pounder or whatever on the final day off a brush pile. So those things could pay off for Patrick. But yeah, I may not have picked him in my 5-man team, but that is because I have other plans for him. I will pick him elsewhere. But I do think that this allows you the opportunity to test the waters of someone else instead of having to go into the local bucket. And honestly, he's allowed to do very well. He's allowed to do well when we don't pick him. So we'll see how he does in the sight fishing event. For bucket, and that was your bucket B pick, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Greg Hackney there. So give me your bucket C pick then.
So I'm taking the route that you took in bucket B into bucket C. I'm going with KJ Queen in bucket C. So KJ Queen is a very, very underrated sight fisherman. So just a story for you in the Harris Chain event. KJ Queen and John Cox found almost all the same fish. I heard from some of our on the water photographers, Dalton Tumblin being specific. He was talking about how they were fishing in the same area and they had found the exact same places, the same fish, same everything. And that to me speaks volumes, on somebody's ability to sight fish. And, I'd say the big picture, a lot of people wouldn't consider him a, big time sight fisherman, but, sight fishing, springtime, 2.8% in bucket C. I like that being one of my gambles. I had a tougher time picking in bucket C. There were some guys, super high percentage, that definitely like in this tournament, but this is the bucket that I was willing to, try to take a little bit of a risk and go with KJ Queen.
Yeah, I knew that Jason Christie was going to be a high percentage pick. Seth Fighter is still a pretty decent percentage pick, but only 4 anglers in this bucket are over 10%. The other 2 would be Gerald Swindle and Chris Johnston. And how about this? A little kudos. This is the highest Rick Clunn has been in fantasy fishing buckets probably since his winning years. When he won an event, he was obviously leader for Angler of the Year, then, comes down. But after 2 events for the Elite Series and the Classic being involved, he's in bucket C after a quarter of the season. Kudos to Rick Clunn. He's fishing well this year. We'll see how that goes going forward, but I wanted to give kudos to him. He is not my pick for this, so do not try to box me in, Kyle, to picking Rick Clunn. But I will pick Gerald Swindle, and a little bit was because I took him off my team there, but I took him off my team for complete clarity from insider info, and it was probably, I got burned by the stock market, which is correct on me. Good for me for listening to something that no one else has access to and making a bad decision. But Gerald Swindle said he was going to fish offshore in deep water the whole classic. And I was like, that is not what I want to see Gerald Swindle doing. That's not why I picked you. And so I moved him from my team. He ended up doing very well early in the event and then faded a little bit on the final day, dropping down to the mid-20s. So a little bit of redemption time. G-Man, I'm picking you, baby. And I do not expect to see a spinning rod and fishing offshore at Santee. And if I do, I'm just going to have whatever finish you give me, because I'm not going to remove you this time.
Not going back on your pick on
I can't.
So I guess it's your turn to go.
Oh yeah, D. You already picked bucket C. I'll jump right into my bucket D then, since I'm a dummy who doesn't know how this show formats. But I'm gonna go with a guy, a decently percentaged guy. Now we've got Hank Cherry in this bucket, 31%. We've got Iconelli 14.5, Brock Mosley 14%, and then Luke Palmer 14%. Everyone else below that double-digit threshold. And I'm gonna go with Brock Mosley. Man, he's due. He is due. This is the year of people who are due. You've got Brandon Lester winning the Open, John Cruz winning the Elite, Buddy Gross. I don't know if he was due, but he did it. And so he got it done. And then Jason Christie winning the Classic. He was due for some redemption. I think it's time for Brock Mosley to win. And I think that this is a kind of event that he can win. It sure would take a lot of pressure off of him going to Chickamauga and Pickwick and Flake Fork coming up if he was to get it done. He's not stressed about it. He knows who he is as an angler. I've talked about it with him in person this past week at the Classic and was like, you're probably the guy on that list now that's at the top of the most deserving that hasn't won a Bassmaster event. So it's his time's coming, and hoping it's this week.
I dig it. Yeah, I'm sure he's probably about ready to not hear Mercer tell him he's been a bridesmaid on the Elite Series 3 times or whatever it is. Not that that's not a great accomplishment, because it is. I mean, that's phenomenal. However, obviously he wants to definitely wants to add that win to his resume. So bucket D, I'm going with Justin Atkins at 3.9%. He's our boy, so I have no problem saying that he has burned me and us before.
And he needs it this week too. He needs it.
No doubt. So definitely, somebody that needs a big event. Kind of goes back to the same thing I mentioned early on in bucket A. A guy that can throw a wacky rig, a guy that can sight fish, has proved that over the course of his career. Haven't got to see that in his Elite Series career so far, a lot. But, at 3.9%, I really like Justin Atkins in bucket D.
I like it as well. Now give me your bucket E pick.
So bucket E, I'm going high percentage in bucket E.
Me too.
Here's the deal. I'm not going down with a ship that didn't choose Kyle Welcher in bucket E. I'm just not doing it. So I'm going Kyle Welcher in bucket E. Obviously, it sets up so well stylistically for him for this event. Welcher, is that what you?
That's what my pick is too. 3, 2, 1. Kyle Welcher. We both did.
Yeah. I apologize. I'd already said Kyle Welcher, so I thought.
No, you're fine. We don't even know our teams, and so when you said a high percentage guy, I was like, it's gotta be my guy.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, obviously I'll let you hit on it too, but sets up so well for his style. Such an uncharacteristic 2 first events from Kyle in Florida to get his mojo back, to get some momentum rolling back from the Classic. It doesn't seem like one of those guys to me. He's obviously so calculated, very intelligent guy. Doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to let the letdown of the Classic affect him, past probably the day after. Obviously going to be upset about it to an extent, but at Santee Cooper, I could easily see Kyle Welcher, everything that he does well is going to play in this tournament. So like I said, at 31%, I never like doing that, or 33.2%. I don't like doing that more often than not. And I know you agree with that too, but it's one of those things. It's like, I'm not going to go down with the 60% that doesn't select him, or 60, well, whatever percentage it would be. And let him be the highest selected or the highest angler in the bucket. So I'm going Welcher.
Yeah. And I will say, I'm with Welcher as well. And I think it's funny, Dave Mercer said something like, Kyle Welcher has cashed a check in 22 of 27 Bassmaster tournaments. 2 of them that he hasn't were the last 2 events. Yeah. So like, you know, obviously we've paid the full field the last few years. So that number is going to get a little skewed, but we also stopped paying the full field and paid basically everybody but the bottom 20. And so Kyle's just never been in that range of the bottom 20, except the last 2 events. Uncharacteristically did not start well. I said it on the podcast. Go back and pull the clip. I said it on the podcast. This is a great chance and a great opportunity for Kyle Welcher to right all the wrongs of the season and wipe it off the slate at the Classic. I did not pick him. I just said it. I don't know why I say things if I'm not going to pick him as well, but he did. He got 2nd place there. Completely different mindset. You'd think that he was a killer for the rest of the year, but man, winning that Classic for him would have been awesome because he would have not had any kind of issues because he would have been in the Classic next year already, but he's got to kick it into high gear to be able to make it to the Classic. You don't want to have 3 bad events. So I'd expect Kyle Welcher to start well. And I really like him for, obviously we think about that 10-pounder flipping in Florida. He's a winder, man. He loves moving, throwing some bigger baits, throwing some bladed jigs and crankbaits and spinner baits, things like that. He is a winder. Even a frog, if he can mix in a frog this week, it will make my heart happy. But Welcher likes to mix in all kinds of power fish and moving baits. I would expect to see some of that, especially early in practice. He may develop something like that compared to the sight fishing game. That won't suck him in. And I think that you can catch 100 pounds fishing at Santee Cooper, just like you could maybe finding 15 or 20 of the right bedfish if it all played out perfectly. But I think that you can flip your way to 100, or you can have some moving baits play a factor to 100 for Welcher.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we're ready to move on to Mercury Bassmaster Drain the Lake. So Ronnie's taken the reins in Drain the Lake over the last couple tournaments. So I'll let him get us started with his first 4 picks.
Yeah, and I will say real quick, I'm looking at the brand new Bassmaster website as well. I wanted to drop the kudos to that. Kyle Jessie's been working very hard. Chris Mitchell hasn't done a dang thing on this website.
That is not true. Chris Mitchell has done the heavy lifting. My back doesn't hurt whatsoever. His back has got to be sore as can be from carrying the team on this one.
So brand new website. So hang with us if you're having troubles with different things. I just even went to Kyle Welcher's stats, went to click on his finishes, and it took me to an article. Some things that are getting migrated over from the other website. It's not like I just Control A and selected everything and just drug it over. No, it has to flow through. So just be aware if you look up any statistics of anglers that you're looking to make picks on, just know some of those things may not have migrated over just quite yet. Be patient. Don't hate us. This isn't the ideal time to debut a brand new website, but we are in the process of doing that right before a tournament. So hang with us on that and just watch the process. This is my 3rd different website that we've done since I've worked at Bassmaster almost the last decade. This is your first site renovation, Kyle. And I remember a story from back in the day when we migrated to one of our most recent versions. All of my photo cut lines, all the words and sentences below my photo gallery were all mixed up. But the problem was I took about 5 to 8 photos of birds throughout the day at Toho, and I labeled the birds on what kind of bird they were. And wouldn't you know it, all my captions got mixed up and they went on top of other bird photos. So people thought that I was just an idiot and thought a blue herring was a bald eagle and a coot was an osprey and an osprey was a mallard duck. So I got all kinds of flack for not being a bird expert, but I promise you, I knew the birds. It just was one of those things when the new website migrated different photos and things, they got out of order. So if stats aren't quite what you want, if you can't find certain things, hey, just drop a follow for Kyle and I on Instagram or Twitter, send us a message and we'll try to get you the info you want, but do not heckle us unless you follow us. I need that. I need that follower love if you're going to give me the headache.
And to your credit, if they are getting that worked out right this second, I know because we talked about it before I left the office this afternoon. But if you go down to the bottom where it says view all tournament stats, that will still give you all their tournament stats. So all you have to do, Command F, find it on that way. Right now, it's perfect. There's a lot of different things going on, but you can still look at the results. Just get some kinks worked out. Of course, that's always going to be the case when you launch a new website of any sort.
So I will say, yes, that's perfect. It worked for me. I clicked on 27, which was the total number of tournaments, hyperlinked for Kyle Welcher. Did not take me there. It took me to a website or an article, but viewed all tournament stats takes me to his standing. So perfect. Thank you, Kyle. Look at that. I'm glad we cleared that up for anyone listening to the podcast that's wondering. There will be a lot of things changing, but it is a good and solid move going forward. So that's a little website front. Now, Mercury Drain the Lake. This is my kingdom. This is where I reign supreme. This is my, people are like, you can't be the king if you're not number one. And I'm like, you know what? There have been some bad dictators and bad kings and bad presidents in our lifetimes, but they're still in control of the kingdom, no matter if they're a good king or a bad king. I'm just the king of fantasy fishing. That doesn't mean I'm a good king this year. I've been good king before. I've been bad king. I'm getting a little mix of both. So lay off me on that. I'm getting the hang of being a king of a realm, of a kingdom like this. So 4 picks of my 8. I'm going to give you half my team. You'll give me half your team. We'll go back and forth. For Mercury Drain the Lake, I've got the winning weight set for 94.11. And I will say, before I get into my picks, which people probably like, you were just about to get into your picks, I was about 40 pounds off the winning weight at the Harris chain. It was 77 pounds. I thought it was going to be 118.
He's not lying.
At the Classic, though, hey, I don't catch the fish. I just make the predictions. At the Classic, though, I said 53.15 for the winning weight. It was 54 even. So I went from being 40 pounds off, hero and zero over here. I zeroed, and then I heroed it being 1 ounce off at the Classic. So doesn't give me any other points other than that, hey, I don't know what I was thinking, but I had a lot of confidence in our anglers, and it did not work out that way. But 4 picks. I'm going to go one guy duplicates, David Williams. I had him in my 5-man. I've got Greg Hackney, Patrick Walters, and Jake Whitaker as 3 other guys. So David Williams, Greg Hackney, Patrick Walters, and Jake Whitaker. That's my first 4 picks for Mercury Drain the Lake.
So I want to be transparent on this too, because Ronnie has mentioned this before, but they previously set their entire Drain the Lake for the entire season.
Before the first cast at St. John's, we set our whole entire year, and I'm trying to abide by that. At least I have it written down on paper, so if I don't pick it on the website, it's whatever, and I can still go back and do that, but I'm trying to keep it. If I don't disagree too much with my previous self, I'm picking the team.
So with that being said, I do almost the exact opposite. I will switch my Drain the Lake. I'm not kidding when I say this. I don't ever change my Rapala fantasy fishing. I said it once, never change it. Drain the Lake is a little different. And I would not, okay, this is the way to put it. Practice what I say, not what I do, in the sense that
you're already going to be a great parent, Kyle.
Mapping out a schedule of kind of who you want win is definitely the way to go with Drain the Lake. I have not went that route this year, and it has cost me. With that being said, I'm not afraid to change anglers and Drain the Lake. It doesn't bother me nearly as bad. But anyways, getting into the picks, I am going Patrick Walters in Drain the Lake. So you kind of hit on that earlier. I'm okay with going with him on Drain the Lake just because the odds of him winning the tournament, it's one of those games you kind of have to play. I like his chances to win just based on being a local, so I would feel dumb for not having him on my roster. That's just my thought process. Drew Benton, Sight Fishing 101. If it plays out that way, I like Drew Benton. Carl Jochimson. I went Carl just purely based on the history, and I usually don't do that. I almost never do that, but in Drain the Lake, I'm okay with doing that every once in a while. And then I did duplicate with KJ Queen to round out my first 4 of Drain the Lake.
Yeah, and I think the history you're talking about is I think Carl got second to Brandon Polinick in 2020 in the fall. Right. And was on a pretty cool bite there as well. Lost to his buddy, but still had a great showing there. And he needed that. He'll look back and be like, that was a very important tournament for my Elite Series career and averages and whatnot to stay requalified. So give me your 4 again. You said Patrick Walters, Carl Jochimson, Drew Benton, and who was the 4th?
KJ Queen. So that was my other, that was one of my duplicates as far as the roster goes.
Yep. And then my last 4, I went Jason Williamson, Mike Iaconelli, Kobe Krieger, and Steve Kennedy. I promise. My rule is do not pick Steve Kennedy in fantasy fishing Rapala. I made that mistake. I said, I'm going to amend my rule and I will pick him for Harris Chain. Do not amend rules that you have set out of anger. I set an angry rule and it was warranted. I should not have picked him at Harris Chain. He did not catch them there. He in fact blamed the tournament staff for having the launch time 30 minutes later than he thought it should have been. And I was like, Steve, what's the deal, man? So I picked Steve for Drain the Lake though, because if you use them, you lose them. So at least if I picked him now, I won't pick him the rest of the year. I won't have a choice. Yeah. But I picked him because it is a big weight event. He did do well in 2020 here, doing something a little different. And I think that of all the tournaments left, I'd like to get him out of the way and pick him here. Because I think of all the other events, it probably sets up with his style just a little bit more than other places do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kick us off on the last four. Wait, did you just give one or did you give all four?
No, I gave all four. I whispered one. I said Jason Williams.
That's right.
Jason Williamson, Mike Iaconelli, Kobe Krieger, and Steve Kennedy. I've got a couple side fishermen in there. I've got some guys who know how to catch them in big weight events, and then some good flippers. So I think for my guys, Walters and Hackney and Iaconelli, they know how to do well in high weight events. Whitaker, it sets up his style with wacky rigs and some maybe moving baits. Williams, the same thing. Williamson, the same thing. Kennedy, a big bait guy, big weight guy. And then Kobe Krieger, sight fishing exclusively. I did not pick him in Florida because that was the low hanging fruit. Good thing I didn't pick him in Florida because he didn't do too great. Now I get him in South Carolina.
I dig it. So I also went with Jake Whitaker, same reasons you went with. Jacob Porosnik, I think, that's one of those events you're kind of getting down to the point where you can only consciously say we've got two more spawning events really technically to go. So some of these guys that are the hammers for spawning fish, I like here or Chickamauga just based on timing, and Chickamauga, we'll get into that later. But Jacob Porosnik, I duplicated up with Stetson Blaylock. I really like his prerogative on this term, not prerogative, but his outlook on this term. I feel like it's really positive. I went with Mark Frazier to round out my Drain the Lake. So in the process of talking to him more at the Classic, we were talking fishing, and he mentioned how much he likes to throw a wacky rig and it being one of his favorite things, and how excited he was to potentially have the chance to do that at Lake Hartwell. I covered him on the water. I don't think that was much part of his game plan. But in a place like Santee Cooper Lakes, I definitely think that, like we have previously mentioned, I think that's going to be a player. And I like Mark Frazier being, I'm guessing, lower percent. I never even saw what his percent was. But
percentage sometimes, percentage is here or there for Drain the Lake because, 100%. Everyone has to be picked at some point for the most part, other than about a dozen people. So I will say for Drain the Lake, for the Classic, I saved a spot. I saved me a spot for having Elite Series guys because I picked Joey Nania for the Elite or for the Classic, an opens angler that will not be in fantasy fishing the rest of the year. I picked him, only had to use 7 Elite Series anglers, which means I will end up with 15, but I have one more angler just available to me the rest of the year. That kind of balanced it out pretty well. I'll still leave some guys off the list that you're like, he's a good angler. I just didn't know where he fit in. So that's how our team's set up. I'll say mine one more time for Drain the Lake. Greg Hackney, Patrick Walters, Jake Whitaker, David Williams, Jason Williamson, Steve Kennedy, Mike Iaconelli, and Kobe Krieger.
So mine would be Patrick Walters, Drew Benton, Carl Jochimson, KJ Queen, Jake Whitaker, Jacob Porosnik, Stetson Blaylock, and Mark Frazier.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, you got anything else about Santee Cooper Lakes? Because we are going to kick off the third event starting Thursday, March 17th. It'll run through the 20th, 4-day event, obviously. 3 days of practice that starts Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Wednesday is an off day. So if you don't see the boys posting on social media, just know they're just getting rested up for a big day of catching. And Santee should not disappoint. Bassmaster Live will be great. We'll got 4 days of coverage, 2 on Fox Sports 1. And I will just say, to wrap up the Hartwell, how cool is it that we were on Big Fox? People were like, are you guys not on FS1 this morning? I said, no, we're not on FS1. We are on FOX. We are on single digit, big time Fox. for 4 hours of the Classic. Last year we were on 4 hours of the Classic at Big Fox, and we had about an hour and a half weather delay at Ray Roberts that day. No delays and some good action on day 2 at Hartwell. Very excited about this event, but I will say, I don't know if I'm going to be on live. And I'll be completely honest with everyone. I did not mess up and punch my boss or anything like that. If I am, you'll see this pretty background. I might ordain it or put some other ornaments on it or something. But we are in baby countdown. Like we got it could be Tuesday that we have this baby. It could be day 1 of the event. Like I don't know when we could have it this weekend. I'm not quite sure. But the baby is on its way very soon. At most, we have 2 weeks left. At least we have 4 days left. So we will see. But I may have another person here to help me break down fantasy picks for Chickamauga, which is very cool.
That is super exciting for you. And, I think everybody can speak on my behalf and your behalf and saying that we are super excited for that to happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen during the tournament, but if it happens that way, it happens that way.
If it does, it'll be memorable leaving live. I'll be like, yo, I got to go.
Yeah, right. For sure. That's the good news. At least you're going to be in Little Rock either way. So you're not going to be in South Carolina. Final thoughts for me. I would say that, it's really hard for any tournament, any Elite Series tournament to follow up the Bassmaster Classic because everybody gets so up for the Classic, and rightfully so. It's the biggest tournament in the history of the sport, always will be. With that said, I couldn't imagine a better case scenario than having Santee Cooper in a potential slugfest just a week, 2 weeks basically afterwards. So I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to it, and we will see how this thing pans out.
It should be really cool. Thanks for joining me today, Kyle. Appreciate you joining me on the Inside Bassmaster podcast. As always, the 2 duo hosts here. Appreciate you, man. And good luck at the event. You had some great photos from Hartwell. I expect nothing short of greatness at Santee Cooper. We will see you guys in the next episode, which will be probably talking possibly to our champion. We'll also mix in, I think before Chickamauga, we will get an episode in, and we'll probably talk a little bit of college fishing and opens, because the weekend between Santee Cooper and Chickamauga is a couple lower level Bassmaster events. So we'll get into that as well. Thanks for having us. Appreciate you listening in, watching in. Ronnie Moore, Kyle Jessie, we're out. See you.